My other mindset thing that I do, my little Jedi mind trick is what I do is I kind of paint worst case scenario. What if this entire deal just fell out of my pipeline? Okay. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? The deal's going to fall out, and just like kind of paint the worst case scenario for yourself. Let your imagination run wild. This client's going to hate me forever. They're going to call my boss, whatever it is. Can you survive that? You can. And when you can have a little bit of that emotional detachment, it helps with being able to work through it.
Welcome to the Sales Gravy Podcast. I'm Jeb Blount Jr. filling in for Jeb Blount Sr. And today we have an amazing guest. I'm so excited to get to the conversation with Miss Amy Franko. But before we get started, I do want to let you know that if you haven't signed up for Outbound, go to outboundconference.com, outboundconference.com, and go get your tickets now. This is the best conference for sales professionals in today's day and age to go get the next winning edge for your sales year and the end of the year here in 2024 and in 2025. Those tickets are at outboundconference.com. It's in San Antonio, Texas, November 6th through the 8th. That's November 6th through the 8th. Go check that out now. We're going to talk about that a little bit in this podcast. But Amy, thank you so much for being here at the Sales Guru podcast.
Oh, JBJ, I'm so excited to be here and could not have said that better myself. Everybody, you need to get your tickets to Outbound Conference. I think I saw a note this morning, maybe 50 or 60 tickets left. So time's a ticking. Get your tickets.
Get your tickets now. And speaking of Outbound, one of the focuses of Outbound is pipeline. It's pipeline productivity and prospecting. And you work and you're an expert in sales, but an expert in the mid-market specifically. And you work with a lot of different organizations that are probably getting into the mature part of their business. They have a dedicated sales team. They're not the small business side. They're not quite enterprise level necessarily, but they are really reaching for a lot of hefty goals. And pipeline is life. I mean, Jeb Senior will say that pipe is life. One of the things that's interesting about pipeline is velocity, and velocity is where you can really make or break a business in a quarter, over a couple quarters in a year. How do you kind of define pipeline velocity, and what are some metrics that you use to help teams measure their velocity within the pipeline?
Yeah, and your comment on the maturity of the sales force or maturity of products and services is really spot on. A lot of the clients I'm working with right now, they have mature business lines and they're looking for other ways to go to market and to grow, which means different ways of thinking, different products, different service lines, which challenges and stretches the sales team. So to the question about velocity, I define velocity as speed. But if I were to layer onto that a little bit, I like to pair speed with quality. If we're speeding off in the wrong direction, that does not get us to where we want to go. So really solid pipeline means, yes, we have speed, but we also have the quality of opportunities. We're pursuing the right markets. We're pursuing the right clients. So there's some analysis that has to go with that speed. So when I'm working with my clients on how do you measure velocity, what's important, there's probably no shortage of things we could measure. So a lot of times what I see, this is a little counterintuitive, but a lot of clients are measuring too many things, which means it's hard for a sales team to focus on what the right things are. So if we just really define it in the velocity category, it's measuring the number of opportunities in the pipeline. So you do have to have quantity, but then what's the quality of those opportunities? Because it's the quality that's going to help it move through more quickly, and the number of conversations. I'd say the number of conversations to identify opportunities and to start moving them through the pipeline, that's a really easy, tangible metric for sales teams to focus on.
Do you find that there is a challenge when it comes to these new products, maybe these new services or these new ways to go to market, that sales teams are either the pipeline velocity is there, their deals are moving really quickly through the pipeline, but they're not winning, or they're not winning at all, but their pipeline velocity is very slow, and they're trying to get it right before they get to the end phase. There's not a mix of, hey, we're getting this through, we're losing some but winning others. What do you work on with sales teams to help identify quality that doesn't hinder them and bog them down and trying to get the highest quality all the time, but also moving things through quickly enough that they get some experience doing it?
Yes. And so we're going to cover some of this in my workshop at Outbound. So I think this is a great question. There's a balance to having long-term opportunities that you might be pursuing. So the clients I work with tend to have a mix of opportunities. Some might be a little bit more in the short term, but there's also some that might have a longer sell cycle. Could be 6 months or a year or longer. So I like to help clients and sellers analyze the balance of their pipeline. So what's the shorter term versus what's the longer term? And there are usually 5 to 7 different criteria that I will help a client to assess an opportunity. So if you're coming to Outbound and you're in my workshop, I'm going to take you through what those 7 are. And I'm going to show you a way that you can visually map it out. So to your exact point, you can gauge very easily and visually what's the quality of my opportunity. Does it need to exit the pipeline because it's not worth our time and attention? Is it a really high quality opportunity that we want to continue to move through the pipeline? Or is it somewhere in the middle? Lots of opportunities sit in that middle. And that's where smart sellers have to make a decision. Do I continue to nurture this? What do I do with it? So it's helping sellers through that decision making process. So, yes, I do focus on some criteria, but it's also how do you make good decisions with that criteria so that you can move your opportunities through? Every seller's in every territory might be different. The number of opportunities that you need to be successful and to win. You also have to be good at your math, know your territory, and know the number of opportunities that you need in order to move them through the pipeline. Because some will fall out.
And of course, it's different for every business
Yeah.
and every seller and every territory. There's just nuances that we can't speak to in a broad level every time. You have to be sitting across from somebody and really understand them before you give advice in this way. But I want to ask you, going through those criteria, and this is where sellers make or break their year, is in that middle ground where is it worth it or is it not worth it? And I think that one of the challenges, so when I was in my field and I had my territory and I had several opportunities, I ran a fairly lean pipeline, and that was just the way that I operated because I kept quality in. But I didn't really know how to break away when something was failing. I didn't know the exact words to use to a client because when you're sitting across from them and they're telling you all the right things, but it's just moving slowly. What are some strategies that as a seller you should employ to break up with your client or break up with your prospect, respectfully and professionally, but let them know, hey, I'm not working with you anymore?
Right, exactly. Yeah, that's a little bit of the art to it, right? Something that you said before I answer that question that I think was really important was in your experience with your territory, you ran a lean pipeline because you were highly focused on quality. And this comes back to the metrics conversation is to really pay attention to the false gods or the false metrics. Sometimes we get lulled into complacency by quantity, but we really want to also make sure, to your point, if we're going to run a lean pipeline, which is a good strategy if you have the right quality. So pay attention to the false metrics as you are analyzing your pipeline or you're working with your teams. But to come back to your specific question, if an opportunity is not going to be of a high enough quality to pursue for whatever reason, one of the biggest things that I see is the case for change. Even though they see it and they know that they need it, we see it, they know that they need to make this change. Sometimes there's just a lot of inertia in an organization. That's probably one of our biggest competitors is just that inertia to making a decision and following it through. So the way that I like to think about it, and I'll coach my clients, is the opportunity in the client itself quality enough that even if you don't pursue this particular opportunity, you just want to make sure that you maintain a really good relationship with them.
Hmm.
And a lot of times the answer is yes. If you've done the work of building the relationship, most times it's worth maintaining the relationship, but not just my level of time and attention on this opportunity. So this is where having really good tactical phrases are helpful
Hmm.
because if we don't have the right words to say, we can never say them with confidence. And Jeb Senior talks a lot about relaxed assertiveness, I think is what he calls it. That's when having the right phraseology comes into play. So I might say something like, you know, JBJ, we've been working on this opportunity for probably about 6 to 8 months and working on solving this problem. And just in all candor, it just seems stuck. It seems like we can't get to what's next. Tell me a little bit about what's going on in the organization. Give me your perspective so we can figure out together what a good next step is. We might decide we still want to pursue it, or we might decide to set this aside for now and come back to it at a specific point in time that behind the scenes, we ask for that time on the calendar before we leave the conversation.
No, I really like that process because it puts the ball back, and it puts the ball back in their court, where a lot of sellers and even myself in my experience where I've gotten stuck is I am doing everything for the prospect. I'm always at their beck and call. You are the go getter. You want to be because you want to impress them, and that's where I got stuck is I wanted to impress my prospects.
I could so relate to that.
Yep, and I wanted them to like me, and I wanted them to really trust me, and so I was really the energizer, like, "I'm gonna go do this, I'll do this, of course I'll do that," and then, eventually you just run out of energy because the inertia within their organization, and it's so obvious, the person that you're talking to, the maybe the main stakeholder that you have, and maybe this is, in the mid-market, you have several stakeholders, you might have 3 or 4 of them, you may have a committee, but typically about 3 or 4, and if only one of them is talking to you, like, every hair on your neck should stand up and say, "Okay, they're bought in, but let me be honest with you, Amy. You and I are on the same page, but it doesn't really feel like the rest of the organization is. Why don't we put this on the table and come back to it 6 months from now, and we'll see where we're at?"
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that does that sound fair?
Absolutely. I like the does that sound fair question, because then they can come back and give you their thoughts around that. The one comment that you made that I think is real gold there is the wanting to be liked or the need for approval. And when I work with my clients, and I will assess my clients and take a look at a number of different sales competencies. But probably one thing that can slow down our pipeline is what's up here in our own
Mm,
minds. The stories that we tell ourselves about an opportunity is going to be successful or not successful. And it's the need for approval, the want to be liked that can stop us cold in our tracks from asking the tough question or just making the comment that you just made. Here's what I'm observing. Tell me what you see. Let's figure out where to from here. Because we're afraid of the opportunity to fall out of the pipeline because we haven't filled it with something else, we allow our need for approval to get in our heads.
it's a really tough place to be, and when I hear podcasts and when we talk about it, it sounds so easy, like, oh, it's just in your head. It's you didn't fill your pipeline enough. It's like these are just words that we say, but when you're in it, it's so difficult. Um,
Yeah.
Mindset wise, having been there yourself, I'm sure, and having worked with thousands of sellers who have been in this place, um, how do you coach someone to handle that adversity better than they would have maybe, you know, months prior before meeting you?
Yeah. Oh, you nailed it though. It's one thing for us to talk about this in a podcast. Oh, just fill your pipeline. Oh, just say these things. It's another to actually go through it yourself and to live the experience and then to come out on the other side of it. I do joke with my clients that I have a 100% survival rate with all of this. So you will make it through and you will be better for it on the other side. But the way that I like to think about it is I don't like to go into a scenario not having thought it through.
Mm,
So eh, and I don't mind having like, kind of a left field question or anything like that. It's you have to have some agility. But if I know that something's stuck, I'm not going to go into that conversation winging it. What I want to do is think through for myself, why is it stuck? What could be the possible combinations or scenarios? And what might I offer as a way to get it unstuck, to think through it? that level of preparedness is what helps me to feel confident going into the conversation.
Mm.
And then you've done that work. You can't necessarily control you can't control what the other person's going to say, but you have to think through what are the different paths that they might take and how might I respond.
Mm.
My other mindset thing that I do, my little Jedi mind trick is what I do is I kind of paint worst case scenario. What if this entire deal just fell out of my pipeline? Okay. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? The deal's going to fall out, and just like kind of paint the worst case scenario for yourself. Let your imagination run wild. This client's going to hate me forever. They're going to call my boss, whatever it is. Can you survive that? You can. And when you can have a little bit of that emotional detachment, it helps with being able to work through it.
Mm.
So those are some of the things I do.
So if you're a sales team and you have 5, 10 sellers, 15 sellers, you've got a new product, you're looking at pipeline velocity, and you want to identify bottlenecks.
Mhm.
What are some indicators that would let you know that your sellers are getting stuck
Yeah.
somewhere along the process? What are some things that you observe?
Yeah, I'm thinking of a colleague that is in the tech space, and this company has just a variety of different tech products, services. There's an infinite number of combinations of products and services that you can sell. So when you have a scenario like that, and in this company's case, there was one go to market offering that they wanted to make sure that they were getting in front of their client base, because it was one of those, it's a major problem that lots of companies have, it's low hanging fruit, it's something that you can generate opportunity around, but sales teams just weren't doing it. And so coming back around to your question, that's where things get stuck when there is this kind of obvious opportunity, but sales teams aren't doing it. It usually comes down to a couple of things. Either it's just not top of mind, they just have too many other things going on.
Hmm.
They don't know how to ask the right questions. They don't have the right questions to ask to uncover the opportunities, the right questions, or the right people. And it's not something they're being measured on. So when you take a look at the combination of those three things, it's usually one of those three or multiple. That's where you can start to unwind. Why are we not getting to market with a great offering that we know our clients and customers need, but we're just not getting traction? So those are some things that you could take a look at, in your opportunity analysis and your pipeline analysis.
It was a really interesting experience when I was in a company that had a new product line that was suddenly brought out, and these sellers, and I was newer on the team, but there were many sellers who had been there for 7, 10 years, 15 years, and they were not comfortable with a new line of product, so they sold the things that they were used to, and we had it for months, and they were letting us know, hey, this is it, this is coming out, this is coming out, this is coming out. Go ahead and start selling it. Go ahead and start selling it. And it was interesting that no one, not a single person, sold any significant number of these products to the customers that we had.
Yeah.
And then suddenly, when it became measurable, when it became part of the comp plan, uh, then it started to pick up begrudgingly, but that did pick up. And the more people did it, the easier it became for them to hit their number with that product over and over and over again. So I love those three categories that you kind of say, if these, any combination of these three things or any one of these three things is going to happen, if you don't have them, you're gonna have a bottleneck there. Um,
Yes. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
well, I was going to ask you, what are some examples of successful organizations that have increased pipeline velocity with that you have observed? Like, dive into some real world tangible things that you've seen in the field.
Yeah, as I was thinking about that question, I probably have a couple of examples, but one like recent one that really stands out in my mind is I was working with a company in the hospitality space, and they have business to business clientele and also business to consumer clientele. So you basically have two, some crossover, but some unique market characteristics between those two. And business to consumer was their strength
Mm,
in that, like, the marketing was geared toward that opportunity identification was geared toward that. And so what they needed to do was take the same offerings and gear them toward more business clientele, because business clientele do annual events. They have annual budgets that they have for all of these events. So, in terms of how we worked on pipeline velocity, we needed to kind of set the consumer aside for just a moment and really focus in on what are the potential target verticals,
mm.
and target prospects. What relationships do we have in those, which is where consumers could come into play? And what are the specific activities that we're going to measure? We need to fill the pipeline. We have some pipeline, but we need to fill it more because we see this as a big opportunity. So the velocity play, it was two things. It was working with current clientele to grow that current clientele and find tangential clientele, like related in the same space, and then identifying net new opportunity. The former was easier
Mm.
because that you already had the client base and you could work with that client base to grow it. So more opportunity, more velocity, but then also what are some tangent companies in the same space that I can get introduced into?
No, that absolutely makes sense. If you work with what you're currently doing that's successful, and then trying to expand that, you're going to be able to increase your pipeline velocity, but gives you practice at what you're doing with the net new. So if you're doing absolutely net new, you have the ability to have those conversations with a little bit less risk involved. So that absolutely makes sense. So, any other
Absolutely.
examples that you can think of?
Yeah, I have one other example, but I wanted to come back to something that you said a little bit earlier, which was like that inertia inside the sales team. For as much as we look at inertia in our clients and in our prospects, we have to turn that inward and look at the inertia on, like, our personal inertia
Mm,
as well as the team in general. So if we take like full responsibility for our sales success, it's the question of what's really stopping me from asking the question, following up. A lot of times it's my own headspace, and we have to push past what's uncomfortable. So I wanted to come back around to that because sometimes we slow down our own pipeline velocity just ourselves
mm.
without any help from anybody else. Um, but another example would be, I also do a lot of work in the professional services space, and so accounting and advisory is one I spend a lot of time in, and that's an industry that's very known for what they consider core services. So think about like a corporate tax return or a corporate audit. Those are very core services that most accounting firms provide. There's so much change in the industry. There's a lot of private equity investment into the industry. A lot of these organizations are being some are doing it willingly, some are being forced into
Squeeze.
right into new product lines, many of which are very different from core services. So think about things like cyber and IT related services, HR consulting, other types of advisory services that really stretch the boundaries of the firm.
Mm,
So you have a couple things there that contribute to velocity. You have the actual go to market strategy of the organization, which I'll come back to in a second. And then you have the velocity of the segment itself. And so, as I think about a couple of clients I've worked with, a couple needed actual growth strategy created. Without strategy, you can't create velocity. So, actually analyzing and understanding and creating what is your go to market strategy so that you can very clearly articulate that and you can create velocity in your segments.
mm.
So, sometimes you got to bump up a level to look at the strategic vision before you get into the actual segment or to the actual individual. On an individual level, velocity has had to come with growth. And I would say most, like tactically, having to build new relationships in completely different areas of organizations that they're not used to.
Hmm. Absolutely sage advice. I mean, you're out there seeing it every single day. These organizations that are having to change and be agile and go to market in different ways. Pipeline velocity is truly an area of focus that follows strategy, but is going to tell you whether or not you're going to make your number, whether or not your product is successful, whether or not it's a sustainable business, and being able to understand the bottlenecks, understand the challenges, and also go through some of the challenges mentally, right? You have to
Mhm.
break through some of the things that we're telling ourselves in those stories. Those are all parts of being successful in the sales space. You're heading to Outbound, and you're one of our 6 key speakers. So excited to have you. I know you mentioned your workshop earlier. Walk us through a little bit about your workshop and why people should be paying attention to that at Outbound.
Yeah. And what I love that we're doing this year is that real workshop focus. So you get the opportunity to do more of a deep dive with practitioners like myself and the other speakers and experts, which I'm really excited to be a part of. So what you can expect is a lot of practical ideas and application, but then also some opportunities to start integrating that. And my theme around pipeline velocity is discovery questions and qualification of opportunities. And so they're related. They're related, but I'm going to break them out into 2 segments. So we'll spend time on how do you strategize around the questions that are most important? What are some categories to be thinking of? And what types of questions do you actually need to be formulating? My nuance with it, though, it's not just about asking questions. You have to be able to take those questions and either turn it into a potential opportunity or give the client or prospect something useful that they can use to make their business better. That's our job. Our job is to help our clients and prospects make their business better. Then we'll segue into the nitty gritty of qualifications. So bring your opportunities with you. You want a little hot seat? We'll put you on a hot seat and we'll actually qualify your opportunities. So I'll introduce some criteria. We'll talk through that criteria and then we'll actually map out, excuse me, we'll map out opportunity quality so you can see how your opportunities shake out. You can also take this back to your team. So if you're a leader in the room, real practical things that you can take back to your teams.
I love it. I'm excited for the workshop. How to ask questions plus. I'm going to call it questions plus. Not just how to ask questions, but what to do with those questions once you get the answers, because that's actually where the rubber meets the road. You can ask great questions, but if you don't know what to do with it, I don't know. I don't know if you're going to make it in this business. And,
Probably not.
yeah, and then qualifying deals. I mean, this is where salespeople win their year or lose their year. And I think that while we talk about it a lot, and there's a lot of content around it, it's always pertinent to go and get training on qualifying deals because your personal inertia. We talked about personal inertia. Sometimes your inertia just doesn't quite jive with getting the right deals into your pipeline, and you need a reminder, and you need to get that done. Some people may need a full training course on this, so that's exactly what we provide at Outbound. Outbound is an incredible place to be. Amy, last question for you: why should people come to Outbound?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I'm going to try to be as concise as I can with this. You said it earlier, which I think is really important. You win your sales year, one deal at a time. You win your sales year when you decide to win your sales year. And your sales year is won one day at a time, one activity at a time. But it starts with a decision. And so if we use that same idea of making a decision, you have to make the decision to come to Outbound. There's no other answer in my mind. Make the decision to come to Outbound. Invest in yourself. I say this a lot. So if you follow me at all, you probably hear me say this ad nauseum. Invest in you. Even if your company's not investing in you, invest in yourself. You are your best investment. And then you take what you learn and you apply it, you're going to win your sales year. But it starts with the decision to spend time with us for 3 days and then use what you've learned.
I love it. The greatest rate of return you can get is investing in yourself. There's always something you can do to improve what you're currently doing, and Outbound is the place for sales professionals. It's where you get to meet people like Amy Franko who are going to spend time with you. They're going to be interacting with you. They're going to be in the hallways. Anthony Areno, who's up there with Amy in Ohio. We have Jeb Blount Sr. We're going to have Victor Antonio. We're going to have Pablo Profor. We're going to have Mark Hunter, and they are going to be there to help you not just be on a stage, not just to sign books for you, but to really create an interaction, a relationship with the people who are at Outbound, because there's only so many tickets available. We only have 58 left. Amy alluded to this earlier. There's only 58 tickets left. Outbound is the place to be November 6th through the 8th. November 6th through the 8th in San Antonio, Texas, at the wonderful JW Marriott Resort. So it's got everything you need: pools, golf, food, everything you need in San Antonio there. So join us at outboundconference.com. That's outboundconference.com. Amy, thank you so much for being on the Sales Gravy podcast. Where can people follow you real quick?
The two best places, you are welcome to connect with me on LinkedIn and amyfranko.com.
amyfranko.com, and connect with her on LinkedIn. She has wonderful content. Thank you so much for being here. This was the Sales Gravy podcast, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, I'm doing a happy dance because you watched this video. Make sure that you click like and subscribe so that you never miss one of our amazing sales training videos.